The ego is the system that runs your sense of self. It is made out of thought patterns, emotions, and behavioral loops, and the stories that try to hold it all together. Left unchecked, it creates endless existential searching, chronic disconnection, and the persistent sense that something is wrong. The goal of my videos is clarity, to see your identity and its contradictions for what they are, named precisely, to finally understand what it is that we're all running away from. Have you noticed that no one in mainstream society really talks much about enlightenment or awakening even, although it's getting slowly but surely more popular, also because of psychedelics and people are just confronted with like existential stuff. I mean, everybody is, and that's why I believe this topic is really relevant for everybody. But yeah, it's kind of like a taboo topic, and people usually don't talk so directly about these things. And I want to change that. And in this video, I want to make a lot of things clearer for you, both in the terms of the different maps that you can use or the maps that I'm using, and what my point in this journey really is, and why most spiritual teachers don't talk so directly about this stuff, because you actually create a lot of problems for yourself when you do what I'm going to do in this video. So first of all, I want to tell you that the problem with all spiritual mappings is that they create the exact duality that you're trying to escape. So I will give you now different ways to view the spiritual journey that you can basically map on. But the moment you map yourself onto it, you are likely creating a mistake because you're identifying with the thing that you precisely shouldn't be identifying with. I still think it is valuable to understand what are the different frameworks that you can use, or to at least lenses that you can see that exist. And I really would like highly recommend you to not try to map yourself onto them, but to just see them as like lenses that you can use, and they become very much clearer when you pass them. The question always is, okay, so how do you know what enlightenment is? Like, you're now telling me about these enlightenment maps, and you're here this spiritual guide or guru, and you're selling your own audits, and in a way I'm like kind of selling enlightenment, right? Which is also questionable in the eyes of many. And what is like my deal with all of this, right? Like, am I claiming to be enlightened? And to make things very clear, so I think it is way better to look at enlightenment as a direction, as a principle orientation towards truth. Because at the end of the day, enlightenment is about clear seeing of reality, which means seeing truth for what it is, like seeing reality for what it is. But more than any of all of this, truth-seeking stuff, it is really about suffering. It's about diminishing the suffering that people hold within themselves. And this is what people actually want when they are looking for enlightenment in the first place. And this is a very important bit of information, because now you understand that the real goal is not to have some like ultimate understanding of reality, which is also like a byproduct, but the real goal is to not suffer anymore and to have like a very blissful experience of life. And this is possible, and it actually exists. And the extent to which this is rare and possible within your lifetime, I also want to make clear in this video. Because you have like two sides here. You have like the extreme ultimate like end place, which is full enlightenment, and you have different stages of awakening at the beginning of it, and then clearly the first stages of enlightenment. And when you enter the first stages of enlightenment, a lot of the existential suffering is really removed. And once you enter like the second stage of enlightenment, and I'll cover exactly what this means later, then most of the suffering is really gone. And to the extent that you might even say that you don't suffer anymore. And a lot of people then think that this is full enlightenment because there are certain traditions where this is full enlightenment and this is the entire goal. And then the rest of the entire path gets kind of ignored. That's always the difference also between the gradual path and the direct path. So the direct path is what you see a lot in like spiritual YouTube content, where people tell you that you're already enlightened and that everything is already perfect. And right now you're already there and there's nothing to look for. And people resonate a lot with this idea because it points to the fact that existence already is perfect, and that non-dual seeing or the nature of reality implies that whatever conditions happen is exactly what is meant to happen. And this can be a big antidote for an ego that constantly is trying to escape oneself and not accept reality for what it is like, or trying to seek enlightenment as some sort of goal to accomplish, which is exactly the trap that I please don't want you to make because of this video. So as long as you seek enlightenment as like a goal, you create the internal split that you're never good enough now, and then forever start seeking for something that is already there, which is your own conscious experience in the now. But then people make the crucial mistake and they believe enlightenment doesn't actually exist, that it is kind of like a joke or some sort of spiritual game that people play, and in reality everything is already just like this, and there's nothing to be done. And then people think that their suffering is not something that they can actually solve. And this is completely wrong. And you can dissolve a lot of the suffering through the direct seeing path, like just by being here now, by understanding the present moment of experience, by understanding the totality of present existence, by understanding conditionings, by understanding how the mind creates illusions of past and the future. And all of the stuff is extremely valuable. But there is a gradual path. And the gradual path is the reason why Buddhist monks go into the mountains and meditate for 10,000 hours. Because there's truly some sort of mechanism within your mind that is a psychological structure, like an ego architecture, that has built itself over your lifetime. And to dissolve this requires practice. It requires discipline. And this is why you hear over and over again to meditate more. And meditation is not the only way you can do this. You can meditate more. You can go to retreats and like practice in shamanic practices. You can take substances. You can, they're like shamanic practices with drums and stuff. You just live your life and get triggered by other people that make you angry, and then you look through the life experience that you have through your anger. So a lot of this is also just living your life and seeing what comes up through your life. And it requires life experience, right? To untether yourself from all of your conditionings. And what you want is you want both sides. You want the gradual path and you want the direct path, because both of them at the end work together towards full enlightenment. So where do I fit in all of this? And I want to make very clear that I don't really have like an allegiance to any ideology. Like, I don't call myself really a Buddhist. I'm not really Hindu. I'm none of this. I wouldn't really even describe myself to a philosophy, really. Like, whatever you're seeing on this channel is really like the mix of everything that I've learned throughout my lifetime. And if you are starting to ask me like very specific questions about Buddhism or Hinduism or other like contemplative traditions, like, I'm not super knowledgeable about this stuff. Like, if you want people who are very, very knowledgeable about Buddhist traditions, then it's not me, right? So I'm like the synthesis of a lot of philosophy, a lot of Buddhist traditions, a lot of psychology. I would even say that the entire spiritual journey is really a psychological journey. And I also like physical approaches. I like mathematical approaches, although I'm not really good at math, but I like the conceptual layer of it. So I basically, synthesize all of this, and then kind of can also use the maps that I've learned from the contemplative tradition in order to make like sense of things, because I do think they have like a lot of value. And a different framing that I want to talk about now is like the Buddhist fetters and like the stages of enlightenment. So the Buddhist fetters are what are blocking your enlightenment, which is also like a very useful, like, it's less of a map, but more like the things that you want to work on in your psychology in order to really free yourself from your suffering and move towards enlightenment. And the difference between the different stages and what the difference between full enlightenment is and wherever I'm at, I'll come to soon. So the fetters are, first of all, self-illusion, which is believing in like a separate self. So it's like any sort of identity view where you still believe like a solid self. And as long as you kind of believe in your ego as real and your identity as real, you're not going to enter the first stage of enlightenment. And the reason for this is that the ego is an illusion, and it's creating like all of the suffering and it is kind of the fuel for all of the madness that you see in current society as well. And the self-identity view needs to drop, and not some sort of like, not as like a belief system, right? And this is what so many people get wrong, because so many people might believe, oh yeah, I dropped the self-identity view, I don't believe there is no self. But just telling to yourself that there is no self is not the same as actually having dissolved psychologically the part of you that believes that there is no self. So there's a meaningful difference. That's again the gradual and the direct path. You have maybe the beliefs through the direct path, through the seeing of your experience, that the identity view is false, but you actually haven't done the practice to actually dissolve the part of your brain that is still creating the self illusion. Then another fetter is doubt, which is just doubting if, any of the part of the path is true. Like if it is really true that there is no self, if it is really true that awakening and enlightenment is real, is it really true that you can accomplish this? Is it possible for you to actually gain access to this level of understanding? Or will you always keep relying on other people and needing to believe in something? And this is like the second fetter, which is super crucial. Then you have attachment to rites and rituals, which is the belief that you need to live in a certain way in order to become enlightened. Like, in order to become enlightened, I need to, I don't know, like be completely, like live like a monk, and I need to meditate 3 hours a day, and I can only eat clean, and I never can have sex, and all of these kind of rituals and attachments to these sort of like very constrictive forms of worldviews that cause you to never be enlightened, because you're basically constricting your identity into like a certain form. And it's also like the belief that you need to break free of all of your bad habits in order to become enlightened. Then we have sensual craving and desire, which is the desire for pleasure, basically. We have ill will, which is just aversion or like hatred. Like if you wish something bad on another person, and it doesn't really matter who, like as long as there's like this part of you where you hate somebody or something for some reason, then it's still ill will, and it still will block your further enlightenment. Then you have insistence on material form, like believing that the material world is fundamentally real, or you're attached to the material world as like fundamentally real, which is the reason why, if you're like a hardcore materialist, you're likely blocking your own enlightenment, not because it's false, but because your ego architecture is attached to the idea. It's independent of if it is true or not. Then you have insistence on like the immaterial world, or like attachment to the immaterial world, which basically is what my last video covers, right? Where you get attached to consciousness, or get attached to awareness, or get attached that you need to transcend outside of your human body in some other realm. Then you have just conceit, which you can also call comparisons. Like as long as you compare yourself to other people, you still live in a sort of hierarchy, which causes you to see the true nature of reality. Then you have restlessness, which is just endless anxiety and racing thoughts, and the fact that you can't stay still. If you look at deep spiritually advanced teachers, and usually the ones who actually practice a lot of meditation, they have a very still body, because they've actually integrated a lot of the nervousness out of their within their body. And then ignorance and not knowing, which is kind of like the attachment to knowledge itself, which blocks a lot of people, especially if you're very advanced in spiritual insights and have a deep understanding of reality. Then even though you might think it is like very free from attachment, you're often attached to this, like to the fact of knowledge itself. So when you reduce a certain number of these fetters to a certain degree, you enter stream entry, which is the first state of enlightenment, which once you experience this, you'll likely have like 3 days of samadhi, which are like 3 days of immense bliss. And this feels generally quite intense, but very, very nice. And this is why stream entry is actually kind of obvious once it happens, because it is so in your face. Like you don't take any substances, you're not on drugs or anything, but you suddenly have like a certain shift in your consciousness, and then for 3 days it feels like you're very high. That's how I would really describe it. It just suddenly feels like you've taken something when you haven't taken anything. And what happens usually is that people believe they've entered stream entry because they had a glimpse of some sort of very deep existential realization, and then they identify with the idea of, oh, I'm a stream enterer now. And this is so common that I would advise to not believe in any of what I'm saying here. So stream entry doesn't even exist, okay? Like I've been very lucky to learn about the stuff, like really learn about the stuff after it has happened. But a lot of these like spiritual maps, again, they will cause you to think about it as a concept, and then this concept stays in your mind and kind of makes it sometimes more difficult to actually get there. So forget about this. It's better to focus on the fetters, or to to focus on like your suffering and look at your suffering. But in fact, stream entry is what happened to me in November 2024. I also wrote a Substack article about it, and since then a lot of suffering has deeply reduced. And then the next stage is once returner, where the suffering is even more deeply reduced. And it is my understanding, although I'm not a Buddhist, that I am at the once returner stage. And that's why personally I feel pretty free of suffering. So I used to suffer immensely, just from existing. Like I hated existing and didn't want to exist. And then stream entry liberated most of my suffering, although I still was kind of feeling off a bit in the sense of emptiness and not knowing what I want to do with my life. Like I was still like working at this channel and stuff, but it kind of felt all pointless then. And then I wondered, okay, how do you combine this with like ambition or actually having like a successful life? And then there was like still a little bit of also kind of attachment to my own insight, like thinking, like I still had sort of like a spiritual guru identity, I guess, or like spiritual teacher identity, better said. And then this like dissolved over time, and it's my understanding now that I'm at the once returner stage, which is the second stage out of 4 from like full enlightenment. And yeah, that's why I'm actually pretty content all the time. It feels weird to say this, because it's always like as if I'm like flexing my own well-being, right? And that's also why it's so difficult to do or like sell what I'm selling, because the conflict of interest is very obvious, and that you see this all over YouTube, right? Like if you are a spiritual teacher, you're supposed to show always like how happy you are and how enlightened you are, and all of this stuff. And I just categorically refuse to do this. But yeah, if I'm honest, for like 2 years, I've been extraordinarily content. Now, the third stage is non-returner, which is the third stage of enlightenment. And to get there, you have to reduce more of like sensual craving, and some like ill will, and the other fetters too. Like almost all the fetters are always relevant to you. Like it's not really something that you can just remove from your list. Like it's always something to be conscious of, because usually this work is like a spiral that you just go deeper and deeper into, and you revisit the same ideas over and over again, and you thought you completely understood something, and then it hits you as if you've seen it for the first time again, and it's like, wow. And then the ultimate, or the end stage is arahat, which is like full enlightenment. And yeah, it is my understanding that the difference between what I'm feeling right now and an arahat is just the immense of bliss in the body. I am not an arahat yet, so you of course can take this with a grain of salt, but it is my understanding that it is like what I've done is I've reduced 99% of my suffering, and now I was like pretty content. And a lot of people stop there, and according to a lot of traditions, I am enlightened. According to like certain traditions, who like see the end at like stream entry, which for a lot of like deeply advanced people who follow the gradual path, I'm just at the beginning, or like a little bit further than at the beginning of the real work. I mean, I think I probably still have to meditate for like 5,000 hours, so there's a lot of work ahead of me. This is just a random number. It might be 10,000 hours. Who knows? But the understanding that I have is that once you reach like the deeper stages of non-return and arahat, you basically can use these very blissful meditation states like jhana and samadhi, like the thing that I also experienced for 3 days during my stream entry, and then these blissful states become permanent. And this is where people often get this idea that if you become enlightened, you're always on LSD or you're always tripping. And I believe there's some truth to this, in the sense that there's probably a bliss body that you can like reach. But from what I also understand is people who are in the arahat stage for a long time, this also then settles and becomes quite normal. In the same way that when I was at the beginning of stream entry, everything felt extremely empty and very trippy for a while. Like even after like these 3 days, I still noticed like, okay, like whatever my sense of self was that still was there, that I thought wasn't there anymore, actually is not there anymore, and felt very, very good for like a long period of time, but then also empty and a bit confusing. So yeah, these are the 4 stages of enlightenment. And then how you can imagine, like it is very, very unproductive to try to figure out at which stage another person is, or if you can, like, because you cannot tell, right? And usually what I'm doing right now is very blasphemous, because normally like a teacher needs to give you, like a Buddhist teacher needs to tell you exactly where you're at, because he observes you, and he is at like an arahat stage, and then he can give you like the honest assessment. And in my ego architecture audits, for example, I don't use any of these words. Like sometimes it might slip, but generally I have my own models of understanding. Although I can use these models when it's helpful, I do think they create a lot of like attachments for people. So I try to avoid it. And then like a more useful way of framing all of the stuff is the framing of head, heart, and nervous system awakening. But before I get to this, I want to inform you that I'm now opening a community, and I want, to just unite existentially curious people who really understand that all of this stuff is quite serious and very profound, and it can really not just change your own life, but change the life of our society, of the world, of the future of humanity, as grandiose as it might sound. And people who understand this, who feel the call to know what is true, to want a deep understanding, this community is for those people. And if you want to be one of the first who get access to this, because I'm limiting the first opening to 25 people, then you need to go on my Substack, and then there's a survey, and you need to fill the survey, and then you're going to be one of the first who gets the email whenever my community opens. Now, another framework that is extremely helpful, which isn't as map-oriented, but can also give you a lot of understanding, is the division between head awakening, heart awakening, and nervous system awakening. So head awakening is the intellectual part, which is a lot of what my work through these YouTube videos facilitate. Because the head awakening kind of gives you the ability to stop identifying with your own thoughts. It helps you to think in contradictions, like you see that contradictions actually are not as contradictory as you thought. It is what loses your attachment usually to materialism and just this overly logic-focused brain that thinks that it can logic itself to the ultimate truth. And head awakening usually realizes that this doesn't work, and that you're clinging to your own thoughts is kind of like the ground of yourself, is false. And this can give you a lot of freedom from like your mind, and it can stop a lot of thinking. It can also derail you into pure madness if your body doesn't know what to do with it. Then you have the heart awakening, which is usually the emotional liberation, where you see that you are not your emotions. Like you stop being identified with your emotions, but in the way this awakening actually manifests is it's an emotional opening. So now you actually have to feel all of your emotions, and you cannot do anything against that. Now you have to experience all the feelings that are inside of you, and there's like no way around it. And at the same time that you're not that identified with them anymore after they are processed, you also understand how they're like really a part of you, and they are not something that you can just push down and then pretend they're not there, because they do influence you. So it's like the emotional component, which is extremely important for really embodied understanding. If you just have a head awakening, but not an emotional or like a heart opening, then you're still in a lot of suffering, because you then don't actually know what to do with your feelings. Although I would say that usually people who have like a head awakening, that basically leads them to the heart, because they then are forced to experience their feelings without having the logical overlay in order to stop it. And it's actually usually the path of like head, heart, and the nervous system, which is also like kind of the healthy path, but not necessarily what always happens. And when this doesn't happen in this order, sometimes things get a bit weird. And that's also what my help is for, or other spiritual teachers for that matter. And then you have the nervous system awakening, which the nervous system awakening is something that is also kind of like hidden. like it's not talked about directly, because it can also cause some weird stuff for people when you have a nervous system awakening before you've had a heart or head awakening, and it often relates to experiences of psychosis and stuff, although it doesn't need to be that. But the reason for this is because the nervous system awakening is the realization of The safe way of saying this is that the nervous system awakening is the realization that you're always safe. But in reality, what it relates to is the sense that you are immortal. So it relates with the sense of kind of the eternal nature of all of existence, and the fact that even when you die, there's likely just existence permeating everywhere anyway. And more so than like making cosmological claims here, I would just say that your nervous system is the thing that is trying to keep you alive, right? It tries to make you survive. And if your nervous system is deregulated, then you're always like in survival mode. And you kind of have to liberate whatever is like clinging to the survival mode, which usually comes with a lot of fear. And then you can truly integrate into your own body and be more comfortable. And the nervous system awakening usually liberates a ton of fear. And once this is absolved to a certain extent, like you've integrated to a certain extent, then you feel safe in your own body. Pretty much, yeah, all the time, except if a bear wants to hunt you and kill you, right? Then you're still gonna be scared and run away. But it's likely not gonna have this existential weight anymore that it has without like this awakening component. And yeah, these are like ways to think about all of this stuff. And at the end of the day, this is not about being special and finding that you are the chosen one, but it's about living a happy life and creating a society where everybody is also happy and content. And my mission in this life is to really raise the collective conscious of people and to unite people who also have the same mission of wanting to raise the collective conscious of people. And this is what my community is for. This is what my ego audits are for. This is what this channel is for. And I believe that my approach is quite unique because most spiritual teachers that I see, at least online, they seem to still like have a ton of ego and tend to believe that they are more advanced than they actually are. Like there are a lot of people who call themselves stream enterers, but don't really know what they're talking about. And how you can imagine the moment you believe yourself to be in a certain stage, the ego clings to this like nothing else. Like making a mistaken identification with some sort of spiritual realization is maybe worse than an ordinary ego, because the attachment that the ego can form to spiritual realizations is so immense. Because usually you have like an opening, like a glimpse to something real, and then you kind of want it to mean that you don't need to suffer anymore, or you want it to mean that you are kind of chosen to see reality and like other people aren't. And the amount of suffering that comes, like, first of all, most people who have like a very very strong spiritual ego stay there for the rest of their life, and they get very off, like, not just offended if you kind of like attack it or poke at it, but you can kind of detect this because they first of all they're suffering their own identity, but more so it's that they are cruel. And you can kind of see the extent of the wisdom of like the spiritual teacher and how kind they are and how they truly are oriented towards well-being of others. And I do think that this is like a very good litmus test of in my eyes, what a really integrated teacher looks like. Also the fact that a really integrated teacher is very in touch with their body. Like, yes, you might have like some sort of trippy, floaty, spacey times when you realize some very deep awakenings, and then you kind of lose your contact with thought, and you might be in this floaty space, and you might feel a lot better, or like you've seen a lot of truth. But this doesn't mean that you are actually in stream entry yet, or that you are like truly awakened or whatever. You likely just had an awakening experience, which is very meaningful and nice, right? It's very good. But to identify with a certain part here is just really what you want to keep an eye for. Like, how are you identifying with all of the stuff that I'm saying? Because ideally, you don't identify with any of it. Like, these are just orientation mechanisms. The same way that if you identify with becoming enlightened, you're already kind of, in a bad zone, because it is more like a sense of direction. And whenever you're there, you cannot actually, it's the typical saying, right? You cannot actually be enlightened, because whatever becomes enlightened is already so empty of a sense of self that it is absolutely meaningless for the sense of self. And then you might say, okay, so who then becomes enlightened? And I think a model that you could use is kind of like every sort of qualia in your own awareness field, like every atom, every sort of sensate data that enters your awareness becomes enlightened. Like all modes of perception, all sense of experience just becomes very clear and free of resistance, which then creates the sense of lack of suffering, well-being, and then ultimately bliss.